So as you can see, the model is ready for primer. And before I add in the primer, I'm going to add in the canopy frame color. And I'm doing this straight from the bottle because I'm not worried about it laying down smooth. I want it to be blasted on so it grips onto the canopy because there's no primer on the canopy. So I'm going to shoot it straight 20 psi from the bottle, no thinning. If you've seen any of my other videos, you know I highly recommend priming. What I didn't cover in those videos before is I don't recommend just blasting on primer. First, I recommend only priming the areas where there are seam issues or where you've done seam work. So in this kit, as you can see, I had to do seam work on the bottom, on the wingtips, on the nose, etc. And that's what you're seeing first. It is easier to first only airbrush the areas where the seam issues are, because if you have to fix a seam, it's easier to fix that way without ruining the other parts of the primer or whatever it may be. When you prime the entire model, that's really your final time frame for airbrushing. So I recommend first just priming the areas of the seams that you worked on to see if there's any issues, and then prime the entire model. Again, in this video, I am using Badger Primer. I really love it. I thinned it with my thinner mixture at 30%. This helps the primer flow better and not clog. And it just leaves a nicer, smoother finish in my opinion. If you decide to do what I'm doing here and use my thinner mixture for the primer, just remember to give it about 40 minutes to 50 minutes to dry solid, and then you can handle it and airbrush over it and sand it, whatever else you might need to do. So that's about it on the priming stuff. It's pretty simple, it's straightforward. The Badger Primer lays down very smooth. I will say I would recommend Badger Primer over Vallejo Primer any time of the day. It is a much better primer, so if you can, I would recommend you rather go with Badger than Vallejo primers. Just like in my previous videos, I am going to black base this kit. However, I'm going to do something different with the black basing. I am going to do zenith highlights to my black basing, and I will demonstrate that a little bit later in this chapter. One thing I wanted to mention is I've been doing a lot of World War II German stuff, and I don't even care about World War II German stuff. And this is something I've been thinking about a lot in the modeling world. I just find that World War II German stuff is so prevalent, and because it's so prevalent, it's also very cheap. This kit was $5. I'm working on another BF-109 32nd scale from Hasegawa, and that I got for $10. I mean, it's just all over the place, but it's, to me, honestly, it's some of the most boring models out there now. Oh my god, another 109. Like, how many German models do we need? So I'm gonna move away from these models, even if they are cheap. I can't. They're boring the hell out of me. Okay, so enough of my rant, and onto the zenith highlights. So as you can see on the front edge of the wings, on the top of the cowling and the ailerons, I am going in much harder with the white, and this is creating that zenith highlight. So on the front end, it's going to look whiter versus the back end, and this will look really nice once I add in the camo. It's not realistic, so keep that in mind, but it looks visually stunning, and that's kind of what I'm going for with this kit. Is I'm going for a visually stunning finish versus a realistic finish. And I did zenith highlights on the cockpit as well. I will add pictures of that. I didn't record that, but it made the cockpit pop out a little bit, and it's going to make the camo on this kit pop out. And as you can see, I also did zenith highlights on the bottom as well. Okay, so now I'm going to start painting the kit, and the underside is going to be Vallejo RML 65, thinned with ammo transpirator. And the thing about this you have to remember is don't add in more than 30% transpirator, where the hell it's called, into your paintwork, because it will really turn the paint watery, and it will really run heavily if you do that, and it will not set properly, and it will also be very, very fragile to the touch. So keep that in mind. The transpirator really makes the paint very weak in that regard, or is very, very thin and weak as a result of it. So here, as you can see, I'm just going nice and gentle with my airbrush, and for this particular painting, I decided to use my Badger with the side feed because it just makes it easier to see. So I do really like that airbrush for this purpose. And as you can see, because of the transpirator, there's a different effect on the color over the zenith highlights. You can see it's a lighter color, and so you can see this tonal variation on the model because of the zenith highlights, and that's one of the reasons I use the transpirator. It really helps make the highlights pop out a little bit more with your paintwork. So here is the final results, and you can see this really beautiful tonal change from the outside where it's darker to the inside where it's a little bit brighter. That's what I did on purpose with this kit, and nice lovely finish, but give it a good hour before you handle the paintwork. Time to airbrush the top side. And as you can see, I've masked up the RML 65 using tape and masking liquid. I use masking liquid because masking liquid is cheap and tape is expensive. I've also masked the flaps because the top side of the flaps were the color 02, but on the bottom side and the sides, they remained 65, RML 65, based on references I saw. So I'm airbrushing the 02 as I did before with the 65. I have added in 30% ammo transpirator, and I'm just going nice and gentle and covering the areas where 02 was, and then I will mask over those areas to spray the RML 71. I will say that while I don't care for German stuff, they did have some unique camo. I don't know what this camo was designed to do. I don't think it's practical. But you know, maybe it worked. Although they changed it, so maybe it didn't work. I don't know. I don't know how they came up with this camo. Perhaps somebody who knows more about German stuff can share in the comments on what their thought process was with this camo color. I did see a darkish greenish color camo, and I think that would be more practical over Europe. But you know, maybe there's a reason this one was chosen over that one. Time to paint the RML 71, and as you can see, the kit is masked and ready to go. I've masked using tape and filled in the areas with masking liquid, again because it's cheaper than tape and it works. The masking liquid does not harm the paint at all. I'm using Vallejo masking liquid. I got the big bottle. I think it was like $3 at the time. I've had it for a while, and as long as you make sure to completely close it so it doesn't dry out, it actually lasts for a very long time. And it's surprising how much just a little bit of masking liquid goes. I mean, it really gives you a bang for the buck, I think. Another thing I wanted to bring up that has been asked of me is why I don't wear gloves, especially with acrylics. Because acrylics are not as fragile as you think. They are fragile when you airbrush them in the beginning, but once you give them some time to rest, you can handle them with no issue. What I don't like to do with acrylics is put them on paper. Well, I don't like to put any paint on paper, by the way, because paper is very abrasive. And this is an old trick from my print repair days, is you don't put your work on paper because it's abrasive. So you put it on like a foam, and that's what I have underneath. So the abrasiveness of the paper doesn't harm the paint. And if you notice, if you put your stuff on paper, you'll see little nicks right where the model is touching the paper. but I generally have never had any issues holding my model without gloves. It's probably, a good idea to wear gloves so my hands stay clean, but never had an issue. Here are the final results of all that work done. As you can see, it's a visually stunning finish, and you can see the black basing, you can see the highlights. It's not realistic, but it is visually stunning and it just pops out. Now that the paintwork is done, time for a gloss coat. Now, I do not add in gloss coats for decaling purposes. Let me be very clear about that. I do not agree that gloss helps prevent silvering. I have no evidence of this. I've never really seen this, and I've actually talked about this in one of my other videos. However, I add in a gloss coat because, to me, it's insurance against all the things I'm going to do to the model, including using harsh decal sealing solution, washes, whatever else I'm planning to do. This really protects my paint. And at this point, I don't want to ruin my paint job when I get to this stage. So gloss, I add in the gloss for that purpose. However, as I said, this belief that it's going to prevent silvering, I don't think that's accurate. I've never, I don't have any evidence of this. I've looked this up. I've had conversations with people about this. I don't think that's accurate at all. If your paintwork is smooth, you should have no problems getting a decal onto paint and laying it down without any silvering. So it's really more about your paintwork than the gloss. The gloss isn't going to hide a terrible paintwork. It's not going to magically make it disappear. But here you go. Here's the final results with the gloss coat. This is where I really started hating this kit. The kit decals just went bad on me and I don't know what happened. I used my standard procedure of dipping them and using microceph to help them lay down in place. Unfortunately, the kit decals disintegrated, and it wasn't just one decal, it was all of them. I tried several decals on that sheet and everything disintegrated. So now I had to go find another decal sheet and also a stencil sheet, and a lot of decals, aftermarket decals, don't come with stencils. So this created two-part headache for me, and I just was really unhappy at this point. Thankfully, a fellow modeler at my local IPMS was kind enough to donate a sheet for the BF-109 to me, and I decided to do the number 3 option. The reason I decided to go with this particular aircraft is not because of any fondness or anything like that. It was just the only aircraft that matched the camo scheme that I had airbrushed. The rest of them were a little bit different in their camo scheme, so I would have to repaint everything, and I didn't want to do that. So while I'm thankful for that modeler, I have to say I'm not impressed with these decals. They were not the best. And another fellow modeler was able to donate, was kind enough to donate stencil markings, and even those weren't great. And I don't understand what's going on in the modeling world. So models are getting better, but decals seem to be declining in quality even after market ones, which is kind of weird to me. I don't know why that is. But this kit, for example, as you can see, I'm putting the decals into place here, but it took several coats of microset to first just kind of get them into place and help set them. And then it took several coats of Solvaset to get them to conform. I mean, that's ridiculous in my opinion. So here I'm adding the Solvaset, and I'm adding several coats here, back and forth, to try to get these decals to conform, and it's not great. Wasn't happy with any of the decals, even the stencils. Okay, now that the decals are on, time for the wash. And in this video, I wanted to show another way you can add in a wash. I'm going to use Floor Model Wash, and instead of brushing it on, I'm just airbrushing it on. And this makes it a little bit simpler because brushing it on takes a bit and airbrushing is so much faster. You just want to go light, thin coats and then let it dry and you're good to go. Another thing I wanted to mention is I know a lot of modelers poo-poo Flory Model wash, because it's not seen as a real wash, and it doesn't have all of the different variations in colors and all this stuff. But to me, that's ridiculous, because honestly, wash is the one area where once you put a flat coat on, pretty much all washes look the same, really, unless of course it's a completely different color like a blue. They all look like a dark brownish color at the end of the day. So I think it's ridiculous. I think Flory Model wash is perfectly fine, and it doesn't harm your paint. You can leave it on, as long as you have a gloss coat, you can leave it on for a year and come back and it will come off. So here we are with the final results of the dried Flory Model wash. As you can see, it's much easier to apply this way than a brush. Now that the wash is removed, I'm going to add in some chipping, and the way I'm going to add in chipping is using Vallejo metal colors and a fine point brush. And I'm knocking off most of the paint on the napkin there, and then I'm just dabbing in areas where I saw chipping on some pictures I was able to get a hold of. Now, I will say that personally, I did not see heavy chipping. I am not a BF-109 expert. I don't know if that they are heavily chipped or not, but I just did not see a lot of pictures of heavy chipping. So I'm keeping the chipping fairly light, and then I'm just taking some liberty here and adding in chipping to some other areas. I did not see any pictures of this. I'm just adding it in because I figured this is another areas where chipping would occur because crew are touching it, etc. But honestly, majority of the 109 pictures that I found, they were not, or at least the E's, were not as heavily weathered as I thought they would be for World War II airplanes. I don't know if it's because they just were routinely maintained or what the situation is. Again, not a BF-109 expert, but I saw a couple of books and none of them were heavily weathered. Once I was done chipping with the Vallejo metal colors, I go in and use a metallic pencil because even chipping, you want to add in a little bit of variation to it because it doesn't chip all in the same way. And the way that I know this is because I work with real airplanes, and when we do have chipping, you see discoloration in the chipping itself. So it's not just one solid aluminum color. Where the paint is starting to chip, you'll notice it's a different kind of a silverish to it versus where it's already chipped and starting to wear it down. So just to give it a little bit more depth, I'm using the pencil here just to add in some chipping here and there and to add in more depth around the chipping that I made with the Vallejo metal colors. Again, I don't know if this chipping is realistic. As I mentioned before, I saw some pictures of 109s. They were not heavily chipped. I'm just guessing and doing some artistic license at this point. So don't get upset, folks. Not a 109 person, not an expert in this aircraft at all. The last bit of weathering for this model, I am going to use oil paints to create a dusty mud effect on the wing roots of the model. And I'm doing this because I saw a few pictures where this seemed to be the case, and I think it's because they were operating in the European theater, so it was like a darkish, brownish type of like mud effect on that area. So what I'm doing is I'm using a little bit of dark brown and medium brown, and I am just using just a little bit here and there, and I'm going to dab it in. I apologize for the shakiness of the video. Every time I did this, it shook my camera, so that's what you're seeing right now. But the goal here is to dab it in and blend it so it looks really natural. And one thing I forgot to do here is this is a layered effect. So I'm going to start with the dark brown and the medium brown, and then on the outer sides of the wings I'm going to add in a light brownish color. But I forgot to record that, so it looks much better in once I was finished. than just this brownish color that you're seeing. It didn't exactly look gray because I didn't want it to blend in fully. I wanted to use the lighter brown color to blend in everything. But it's a pretty simple, easy technique you can do with oil paints. Just go in small sections over a flat coat and it works really, really nicely. Time to add in the exhaust stains, and 109s were known for their exhaust stains, and so here I'm using Vallejo Model Air, heavily thinned, and I'm going very gently, and I'm starting close to the surface and then moving further away to create this nice exhaust plume. Now I will say one thing about exhaust. If you decide to do like a heavy exhaust like on the 109 for example, I've noticed that modelers do the exhaust and then they flat coat over the exhaust. You don't want to do that. You want the exhaust to have a little bit of a sheen to it, because in real life, exhausts are created by gas and gasoline, and so there's usually a little bit of a sheen because of the oil and such. So don't add a flat coat over your exhaust. Leave it alone and let a little bit of a shine come through from the exhaust. It makes it a little bit more realistic. On the 109 that I saw, it was all black, so I'm going to stick with all black on this. And here's the final result of the exhaust.